Hi, David Lynn, he, him pronouns. Thank you for having me.
She, her.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you for attending the Urban League of Portland's Meet the Candidate Forum for Portland City Council District 1. My name is Lieber Ford, and I am the Executive Director of the Women's Foundation of Oregon. I will be tonight's moderator. Tonight, we will feature some, but not all, candidates running for City Council District 1. I'd like to talk about the Urban League of Portland's candidate selection process. The upcoming changes in Portland's government created unique challenges in planning this year's forum, and difficult choices had to be made. But the Urban League of Portland is committed to impartiality and stuck to an objective criterion for inclusion. In short, they examine candidates' performance in the small donor matching funds, prior political history, and the number of labor unions, other community-based organizations, and politicians who had endorsed. The Urban League of Portland regrets that it could not include all those running, but their hope is that you will be able to use these forums as a tool to make empowered and informed decisions with your ballot. With that, tonight's forum will consist of an open statement, questions, and a closing statement. Although we hope the forum will be an exciting and informative event, we also want to be an orderly and respectful one. All defamation, abusive, profanity, threatening, or offensive or hate speech are strictly prohibited. Candidates that engage in this behavior will be removed from the forum. Here are a few ground rules for the candidates. Please remain muted if you are not answering a question. The candidate will have 1 minute for their opening statement. We will ask 4 questions tonight. When questions are asked, the candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. After the questions are complete, the candidate will have 1 minute to deliver a closing statement. Please be courteous and conscientious of time. Throughout the forum, when speaking, if you are within 30 seconds of your allotted time, our staff will send you a notification. If you are over time, we will send a chat to let you know when your time is up. If you are persistent in going over time, you will be muted. We love you, but we must get everyone in. With that being said, we will begin with the opening statements in alphabetical order. When called upon, you have 1 minute to introduce yourself. Candidate Candace, your time begins now.
Okay. Hello, I'm Candace Avalos. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a first-generation American, daughter to Guatemalan immigrants and Black Americans from Southern Virginia. I began the first leg of my career for a decade as an educator in K through 12 and at PSU, and now serve as the executive director of Verde, and we do environmental justice work across the city and the state. It's no secret that the challenges facing Portland are many and are complex, but as a longtime civic leader, I've shown my love for the city by advocating to make it better. And I have a record of working with many stakeholders to get that done. I'm eager to bring my policy expertise and my community-minded leadership to City Hall. I am running because I believe in solutions that are addressing the root cause and grounded in our values. I believe in a policy agenda that can correct historic injustices. And I believe our city is safest when our communities are resourced. But most importantly, I believe in Portland, and I'm running to turn our values into action. East Portland voters have long felt left out of the city's vision for progress, but I plan to change that as a champion for District 1. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Candace Avalos. Jamie Dunphy, you have 1 minute.
Great. Thank you for having me tonight. My name is Jamie Dunphy. I am a longtime public servant in this community. I have been in public service in East Portland and in in the city of Portland for over 20 years. I started my career in East Portland working in the David Douglas School District. I was working at Ron Russell Middle School doing gang prevention among 13 and 14-year-olds. I wanted to be a teacher. That was what I thought my career path was, but I found that that system was just so deeply broken that I needed to go and focus on fixing the system itself. And so I've spent 10 years of my career working for, I would argue, 2 of the best elected officials in our region. I spent 5 years working for U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley and another 5 years working for Portland City Commissioner Nick Fish as his senior policy director. Nick was the the city commissioner who passed away from stomach cancer in January of 2020. Our community is at an inflection point here where we have an opportunity to meaningfully change how services are delivered and communities are represented. But we have a long track record in this community of voting for things that sound forward thinking and progressive and sound really good on paper, and then completely failing on implementation. I think that I might have some skills and experience both in the community and in the halls of government to actually be effective in this new form of government. That's my time.
Thank you, candidate Dunphy. Timur Ender, you have one.
Hi, good evening. My name is Timur Ender. Pleasure to be here. Pronouns he, him. A little bit about me. I'm a parent of 3 young kids. First in my family to be born in the U.S. We speak Turkish at home as a family. A little bit about me. I worked at City of Portland for about 6 years and helped launch the bike share program, helped launch the fixed speed safety camera program to keep our arterials safe, and help launch the Fixing Our Streets program, the 10-cent gas tax. Because of demographics and need, a lot of those projects have gone disproportionately to East Portland, things like crosswalks, sidewalks, street trees, and I've had the pleasure of managing those projects. So that's been one of my greatest privileges. What motivates me to run is health equity. East Portlanders have a life expectancy 10 years less than people living west of 82nd Avenue. This is due to historic underinvestment, gun violence, traffic crashes. I'm committed to addressing those disparities in health outcomes and increasing East Portland's life expectancy. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Timur Ender. Terrence Hayes, you have 1 minute.
How y'all doing? My name is Terrence Hayes. I believe that we need to focus on making Portland clean, safe, and affordable. We need to have a strategic plan for keeping our streets clean, especially in East Portland. We need to focus on building a bridge between police and community and investing in the Office of Violence Prevention. And we need to make sure that we bring an industry to our city. We're focusing on trades and we're getting the next generation ready so that they can actually afford to live in this city. I am a husband. I have 8 kids. I have a business that I run that actually cleans up graffiti and do pressure washing. So I'm super excited to bring my lived experience into this space. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Terrence Hayes. David Lynn, you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much, David Lynn. I'm running for Portland City Council because I believe Portlanders want councilors with experience, dedication to service, and honesty and ethical service for the government, and a willingness to fight for our families out here in East Portland. A lot of our families are suffering, and with not just affordability, but with really safety, and they are very concerned just walking around their community. I've put in the service my whole life. I've grown up here in East Portland and spent my whole life serving. I serve on the Centennial School Board, where we've elevated student voice. I serve as president of the Centennial Community Association, where we work on shade equity and resiliency. And I have a master's degree with particular coursework like ethics for public managers. I also serve on the State Cultural Competency Committee of getting healthcare professionals more culturally competent. And so we're fighting for homelessness, getting people into dignified shelter and public safety investments, but also accountability at the city of Portland from the top down. And that's particularly true of the police.
Thank you, candidate David Lynn. Steph Routh, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. My name is Steph Routh. I'm running for Portland City Council District 1. I grew up in Park Rose. I live in Lentz. I've lived east of 82nd Avenue the majority of my life. So I am very excited about this new form of government, which gives us more representation on the first day of the new administration than in the cumulative history of Portland City Council. Pretty exciting. It is not a coincidence that I grew up in East Portland and became the first executive director of Oregon Walks, because we have most of the investments in East Portland have made it a convenient place to drive through, but not a particularly nourishing place to live in. So I'm very excited to bring that experience, as well as my experience over the last 5 years as a Portland Planning Commissioner related to housing policy. And to that end, just want to shout out Urban League's recent housing forum was just awesome at Mount Hood Community College. Excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Steph Ralph. Candidate Loretta Smith, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Libra. Hi, my name's Loretta Smith, and I am a longtime public servant, small business owner, grandmother, mom. I served on the Multnomah County Commission for 8 years. I worked for U.S. Senator Ron Wyden for 20 years. I'm a third-generation Oregonian, and I'm the first in my family to graduate from college. I have often worked in the public sector and as a public servant to get a record of results, and that's what I've done over the years. I've taken on the tough fights, delivering results to improve life in East Portland. I was the only elected official brave enough to call for the opening of Wapato to serve our houseless community with mental health, alcohol, and drug treatment. Now it is being served as Bybee Lake, and people are getting services there. And I'm very proud of that. And now I'm running for city council to fight for the change that I want to see. For the first time, East Portland will be able to get the representation that we need from City Hall by electing in this new form of government. And I'm excited about that. Thank you, Libra.
Thank you, candidate Loretta Smith. Candidate Cale Turn, you have 1 minute.
Hello, my name is Cale Turn. I'm a husband of over 21 years, father of 4, community organizer. My life experience has shaped who I am as a person, as a community advocate. I have 15 years of experience working with the Oregon Department of Human Services, helping some of the Oregon's most vulnerable get back on their feet. I also stood for workers as a union steward, protecting the rights of hardworking families, and an SEIU CAPE leader to organize members to support candidates that stand with workers. I value community, family, responsible governing, and worker rights, things that help families thrive. I have been working and giving back to our community in the past 5 years alone. I work and continue to serve with the Immigrant Refugee Community Organization as a member of its board, providing guidance and direction to the wonderful programs that help immigrants and refugees thrive. I serve as chair of the Asian Pacific Islander Community Coalition of Oregon, developing young leaders to represent Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders in our communities. As a leader in Asian American communities, I stood up and spoke out against the hate in our communities. I'm a frequent visitor to the Portland Police community and share stories about things that our communities are experiencing. As a Reynolds School Board Director, I sponsored and passed Senate Bill 5554, restricting concealed carry in our schools. I'm already taking steps to make our communities safer. Portland's becoming more and more difficult to live in. We have hundreds of people living in.
Thank you, Cale. Your time is up. Thank you. I appreciate it. We will now begin the question portion of the forum. For each question, we will ask the questions in a predetermined random order. When called on, you will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Question 1. The number of households experiencing homelessness in Portland has increased significantly since the pandemic. Black residents in particular are roughly 400% overrepresented in our homeless population. What is your plan to increase access to culturally specific resources and housing for Black Portlanders? And how will you work to prevent them from experiencing homelessness moving forward? Terrence Hayes, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think 2 ways I look at how we help the Black community not experience homelessness, which is 1, we have to make sure that we have living wage jobs, that we are in the trades, that our young people, that our middle-aged folks have access to work and jobs where they can afford to live in this city. I think we have to look at vouchers in a certain way. We have to think about subsidy for folks who are struggling in their homes. We don't want to see them homeless. So we definitely got to increase the amount of investment that we see from our city into our community-based organizations that's actually help supplementing folks that's at risk of being homeless. Lastly, I would just say that we have to think about the importance of home ownership for the Black community. We are out of all of our cultural counterparts, we are the least of folks that own homes. And I think that's a matter of information. That's a matter of wealth. It's a matter of lack of entrepreneurship. So we have to make sure we're investing in the processes that Black folks can self-sustain and not be subsidized to the end of the earth. We got to be conscious of the fact that high levels of subsidy does not create generational wealth, and we have to create pathways through the trades, through entrepreneurship, and things like that. So I will make sure that the Black community has access, and that we're looking at making sure that any money that's coming down the pipeline to help build out those things, that we're not waiting until that money is disappearing to make sure that the Black community knows what's going on. We need to know immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Terrence Hayes. Tamora Ender, you have 2 minutes.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm committed to ensuring people who are work in the city of Portland are able to live here. I'm proud to support the North-Northeast preference policy, which allows homeownership assistance and first-time home buyer assistance to Black Portlanders who were displaced from Inner Portland and who are now living in City Council District 1. Other things, I think prevention is key. As someone who has worked in city government, I generally have a perspective of what is the most cost efficient use of our tax dollars. And to the extent when someone becomes housing insecure, it takes much more resources to then move that person back into stable housing. So any dollar that we're spending on prevention is going to be huge. And so often for families, that can be the most important thing we do. Also, in terms of shelters, we have to make sure we are, that our shelter policy is trauma informed and ultimately moves people into housing. I'm going to be someone that advocates that really we should be pushing for shelter stays that are 5 months or less. Because ultimately the goal needs to be getting into permanent housing. We're so lucky that we have Path Home, which is a shelter provider in East Portland and has had amazing success in terms of supporting working families, keeping shelter stays short, and moving people into permanent housing. Once we make reasonable accommodations for people to have pets and companions with them, that makes a huge difference as well. And then obviously providing wraparound services and things like expungement so that prior criminal history does not become a barrier to future housing and employment.
Thank you, candidate Tamora Ender. Candace Avalos, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much for this question. So definitely East Portlanders feel this in particular because we are where most people go when they're priced or swept out of other parts of the city. And so definitely we need to lean in on strategies that we know work, right? Keeping people in their homes, offering a range of shelter options that are meeting different needs, and getting people housed quickly with supportive services that will keep them stable. So that means that, I am prioritizing a housing first, but not housing only model. And what that means is that housing, going straight into housing may not be for everybody. They might need a couple of different levels or steps in order to get stable. And so we need to have a range of options. And I think in particular, for renters, there was a study that came out last year that homeowners have 40 times on average the wealth of renters. And so if we really want to stabilize our Black community, a community that has historically been, pushed away from homeownership, we really need to invest in those kinds of resources. I am definitely somebody who has benefited from community that has helped me to be able to afford to buy my home. But we need to create systems in place, not just mutual aid. And so that's where government needs to step in. And in particular, as it relates to being culturally specific, one of the things, homelessness is caused by many, many factors, but one consistent factor is a lack of human connection and resources. So this is really where we can be intentional about creating opportunities for communities to build connections with each other, because these connections can help lead to access to other humans and resources to get stable. So ultimately, I think that's an area that we can be particular, and that's an area that Urban League actually does really well. And I think we need to lean on our partners to continue to double down on those strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Candace. Candidate David Lynn, you have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. Yes, this is not just important because this is our community members and family members, but also because Portland has a history of racist redlining and racist housing policies that have affected generations, which then affects people's ability to get into housing nowadays. First off, I believe we have to have specific targeted down payment assistance to get people and first-time home buyers over that kind of generational wealth gap. And we need to use things like land banking and community land trusts so that we can lower the cost of housing and keep it lower over long term. We have Prosper Portland and urban renewal coming to East Portland, and we need to have strong leaders who are going to get community members on those committees that are really going to stick up for the community and make sure that we are addressing these historic disparities and that we are doing targeted housing development for the communities who are already living here in neighborhoods like Park Rose and Centennial. And then we need to explore in the short term, of course, rental assistance to keep people on in their homes and to keep people from falling into houselessness. But then long term, using the leverage of the city's housing development to make things rental apartments affordable for long term. So that we're not just simply subsidizing the private market, but we're making it affordable for people for long term. So thank you.
Thank you, candidate David. Candidate Loretta Smith, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. That's a great question. One of the things that I did when I was a county commissioner in Multnomah County, I listened to community-based organizations of color, and they were talking about that their youth development organizations didn't have enough money. So I went to work. I created a funding source for the Promise Neighborhood that impacted Latino Network, Self-Enhancement, ERCO, and NEA. And then I took it a step further and I identified this Promise Neighborhood on the federal level, where it was the largest prevention program for at-risk youth, which was $30 million. We tried to apply for that money 3 times. And one thing about me is that I'm relentless about trying to get what I think the community needs based on what they say. We went after that $30 million and we were able to secure those dollars from 2018 to 2022. I think there's like one more year because of COVID. But the issue is it's more than just a livability issue. I think we need to start talking about workforce and workforce training. We talk about folks who are on in these camps and who are in RVs, that they need mental health services, they need addiction services, but they also need workforce training. And so as a city commissioner, I am going to try to support organizations who put a lot of energy into workforce training. What we do know is from Chicago University, they did a study and showed that 53% of the people who are living in our shelters, that they were employed prior to being in a shelter. 43% of those people who are unhoused, they were employed. So we need to make sure that we have good paying jobs to ensure that we're putting another tax base into our community to keep our community safe from harm, from being on the streets. And those are the things that I plan to do, and to also identify opportunities to land bank. We need to cut down the cost by land banking and making sure.
Thank you, candidate Loretta Smith. Cale Turn, you have 2 minutes.
Hello, thank you for the question. As like everybody mentioned, I think there are layers to fixing our houseless problem. I think one of the first thing that we need to do is ensure that our fixed income folks are able to afford housing and be housed. Now, as far as everybody else, I believe in a housing first model. In order for folks to be able to maintain work, seek services, seek wraparound services, seek mental health services, they need to have a stable environment to be able to do that. We need to expand our shelter programs, long-term shelter programs, so that folks are able to maintain a place to stay, maintain a place to safe to operate from, and an opportunity to better themselves. Here in District 1, we also need to have more industries come in. We need to create jobs for our folks and help bring jobs into our district. And when jobs are here, we need to expand our childcare network so folks who are able to work can work. And most importantly, we need to provide services, wraparound services and employment, wraparound services with mental health while they're dealing with learning their job. We need to continue to build that infrastructure that keeps people at work, keeps people working. People need to be able to work to sustain housing. We also need first-time home buyer programs to help people with down payments with homes. We need to have programs that support all the incomes, the spectrum of income, so that people get an opportunity to thrive. Everyone, not just houseless folks, but everyone in Portland can have the opportunity to achieve what they want to achieve.
Thank you, candidate Kale. Candidate Jamie Dunphy, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My colleagues have done a really good job of framing this. I think, we call it homelessness, but we recognize that it's actually 5 or 6 different things. And each of those 5 or 6 different things requires a nuanced, empathetic, and humane approach. And as a region, we have failed all of those things. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think that preventing people from becoming falling into homelessness in the first place is an exceptionally affordable way for us to try and deal with them. So a lot of folks who are economically displaced and are right at the edge need a little bit of stabilization. That is a thing that the city can and should, and working with the county, should be focusing on. We also simply need more housing. There's simply not enough places for people to live right now. And there's a large role that the city of Portland can play in increasing that supply, whether it is developing the vacant lots that we have in East Portland that could rapidly be turned into housing, or finding greater, denser uses for existing buildings that are being underused in order to try and increase that supply of housing. We need culturally responsive and culturally competent services, recognizing that a one-size-fits-all approach has not been working. And even our attempts to try and diversify and centralize those over the last 20 years, we are 20 years into the 10-year plan to end the homelessness. And each of those different techniques that we have been trying to do has not been working. What works on one side of 82nd works differently on the other side of 82nd. And we need to recognize that we need a whole spectrum of opportunities for people to be able to say positively, you have an option of where to go in order to try and get off the streets and move towards this, and recognizing that, yes, for some folks, housing will not be the first option, but we have opportunities in this district, especially, to meaningfully change that narrative overall. One thing that I will say that I will do differently than what is being done by the current city council if I'm elected is focusing on constituent services in the district. People at 145th and Division simply will not go downtown in order to get services from their government. We have to bring it to them. And I think that that is the biggest opportunity that this new form of government has for our system.
Thank you, candidate Jamie. Candidate Steph Ralph, you have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. The wonderful thing about going last is that a lot of wonderful things have already been said. So I agree that in terms of homelessness, our unhoused population is also our most diverse population in terms of age, race, ability, everything except class. And so we need a diversity of shelter options, and we need context sensitive, culturally sensitive wraparound services to support those different populations. I want to focus, since my colleagues have done such a wonderful job on the homelessness aspect, I'll just add a couple of nerdy things on home ownership. Recently, one thing that passed, we've had a big issue is all this starter homes, the accessibility of starter homes, because we do not have enough. Recently, there was the city of Portland passed something that came through the Planning Commission, which was the land division code, of making it easier to divide land, so that you don't have a home, a landlord and a tenant. You can cut it down the middle and create two homeowners functionally. And I think that that's a really important thing. We have to recognize there is an inherent tension in our housing market that housing is a basic human right, it is a basic human need, and it is the number one method for building generational wealth. And so I think land division is one. And the East Portland, there are 3 East Portland TIF districts, tax increment finance districts. 45% of those, if that passes, would go to affordable housing. That would include home ownership. And so we really need to look at the governance model and look to, for example, Cully, the TIF that I believe Candace has been involved with. And finally, one thing that has just come up in the state legislature that's moving through is the possibility of a state bank, because we've seen, David was mentioning redlining, and the 2008 predatory lending was another reason.
Thank you, candidates. Staff. The next question is question 2. The city auditor recently found that Portland's inclusionary housing program has not increased housing access for Portland's worst off. This problem particularly impacts Black renters and families who face higher barriers to quality, affordable housing. How will you advocate for increased production and accessibility of housing? Jamie Dunphy, you have 2 minutes.
Great. Yeah. In 2019, the Joint Office of Homeless Services came to City Council and said that there were roughly 4,000 people sleeping on the streets that night. And the next month, the Housing Bureau came and said that there were roughly 4,200 vacant housing units in the city at that time. But 80% of those vacant units were at the luxury end, and most of them were in those towers in South Waterfront. The city has been incentivizing the wrong type of housing without requiring the types of housing we actually need. We have been building the wrong type of housing in the places that we do not need it. We need affordable housing, we need market rate housing, we need lots of housing, and we need it mostly in East Portland, where families are living, where people who are trying to find the last place to be affordable here. The inclusionary housing program has has incentivized these larger developments to be able to build bigger and make bigger profits without actually providing real resources to the community. And there's very little follow through on the back end to make sure that those units are actually being effective. And in some cases, we've even seen those affordable units being built in a way that is counter to the ideas of inclusion and community, including separate entrances on certain buildings for lower income apartments. These kind of things require leadership and follow through that the current system of city council simply does not provide. Additionally, the current system of city council encourages finger pointing, and it does not provide a system of getting to yes. Our permitting system is complicated, and it can take twice as long to build an apartment complex in Portland as it does in Happy Valley or Gresham. They aren't getting half the quality of housing. Their systems just work better. So having a clear sense of what we're trying to accomplish, who we're trying to serve, and where we need those resources are really how we are going to be able to move forward as a city to actually meaningfully increase housing supply. And I'll wrap up there.
Thank you, candidate Jamie. Candidate David Lynn, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe as Jamie was saying, we've made it very easy for more wealthier people to and developers to make kind of larger market rate housing without kind of getting into the density that we need to make it affordable and get it to the people in our community who really need it. And that is because of a lack of follow through with so many things here in Portland. We see from the city council, they start something, but then don't finish it or don't do the extra conditions which made the project feasible or appealing, to the community in the first place. We can do much more with permitting and things like tree codes. We hear from a lot of families here, they want to work with the city in terms of permitting or doing, the right kind of development. But they just constantly are running into red tape and bureaucracy where the different departments are just pointing fingers at each other. And so I think we can do more to streamline that. And then we can make sure that there are models of inclusionary development and as well as ADUs and other kind of things that we can use to infill a lot of the low density areas of the community and have model designs that are just pre-approved. People know, it's already approved by the permitting and will get through easily. And so that we can move through that kind of red tape and bureaucracy and really force a lot more density and development that is affordable. And we also need to make sure that that is kind of publicly owned. Because again, if we just keep pumping subsidies into the private market, we're not going to find ourselves getting affordability.
Thank you, candidate David. Candidate Tamor Ender, you have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, there's a lot of things I'd like to mention about housing. One of the specific roles the city has is zoning. I'm a big proponent of Portland Neighbors Welcome Inner East Side for All campaign, which seeks to increase the availability and affordability of housing between Fremont, 60th, 12th, and Powell in areas that have higher tree canopy, lower displacement risk, and great walking and transit options. One of the things I see at my kids' elementary school is that people are displaced because of high housing prices in Inner Portland, and that puts a greater pressure on East Portland. Council District 1 is the council district that has the greatest displacement pressure out of all the 4 council districts. The other thing I'll say is, I'll be an advocate for looking at city-owned land that could be deemed surplus and be converted into housing. I believe, social housing, which is when local governments themselves build housing, is an option to supplement the housing that is built by the private sector. The other thing I'll say too, in terms of affordability, is after housing, transportation is often the second most budget cost for working families, and so the extent that we can do things like transit signal priority and dedicated transit lanes, those things will also have the effect of reducing time and putting money in the pockets of working families. And also, in addition to that, I'm a fan of 2 separate things. One is single stair reform, which means developers are, instead of being required to put in 2 sets of stairs, they can put in 1, and that allows different types of buildings to pencil out. I have another thing called unbundling, but I'm out of time, so you can Google it. But I'm a fan of unbundling, which is another land use reform.
Thank you, candidate Tamor. Candidate Terrence Hayes, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I shouldn't need that long. We need to change, we need to zone better for multifamily units. We need to upzone. We need to make sure that we have enough places where we can build multifamily. We need 8,000 units a year. We've only permitted a little over 280 units. So clearly we have a zoning issue in our city. Secondly, particular to your questions, which is for Black folks, we need to be able to afford homes. We need living wage jobs. We need to get money and jobs into the hands of the Black community. Too much talk about subsidy. It hasn't worked for our community. Projects does not create long-term wealth. It has never worked for Black communities. We need to be able to afford to be able to live in this city because we have living wage jobs, because we make the money that needs to be made to afford to live in this city. Projects have never created long-term wealth for Black communities, and we can find fancy language to reciprocate the same thing that create projects. It does not build wealth in Black communities, because that was your question. Black folks need to be able to afford. We need living wage jobs, we need education, and we need a city that is going to help move families in a direction of self-dependency and self-sufficiency through entrepreneurship, living wage jobs, and education. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Terrence. Cale Turn, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody says. We need more housing. But the trick here is how. I think there are a lot of ways to do it. I think the one barrier that I hear about most is permitting and zoning. We need to get into the weeds a little bit and see what what ordinances are making it difficult for putting homes. We got to consider, the fees. How do we deal with fees? How do we waive fees? How do we reduce the fees? Or what we need to do something to make sure that people, contractors, investors, developers are able to put up these homes and put them up quickly. We also need to make sure that we get into the weeds a little bit with how people are accessing these programs and who can access these programs. Sometimes what we define as affordable housing isn't necessarily affordable housing for many. People are still getting priced out, even for affordable homes. We need to determine which complexes, which investment we are investing in that truly make affordable homes, and not just put up a front to get public dollars for investments. We need to do a lot in overseeing and making sure that that money that we spend in affordable housing gets spent in affordable housing and not go to the pockets of developers and investors. Again, we need to look into how organizations, how people are connecting with organizations that provide access to housing. And we need to determine how we can increase that access so that everybody can, anybody can reach their goal of getting a house easier.
Thank you, candidate Kale. Candidate Steph Ralph, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. You asked about the inclusionary housing program, so I want to start with that. Until about 7 years ago, our inclusionary housing program is still relatively young compared to the rest of the nation, because until about, I believe, 7 years ago, it was only Oregon and Texas that banned inclusionary housing. It's not that we didn't incentivize it, we actually prohibited it. So in the last year, and I'm grateful to the city auditor for performing that audit. And since then, there has been a work group that, because inclusionary housing, it's a dial, not a switch, in terms of what will boost that affordable housing through the inclusionary housing program. So one of those things has been, as Timur mentioned, Inner East Side for All, because that development of multifamily units doesn't pencil. We don't have the zoning for it, Inner East, so we need to have that for the, and that was identified in the housing production strategies. But I think we also need to capacitate some of that so that we do have some of those subsidies. And that, to Terrence's point, that we can move from rental to, I think, like once we have rental, we can move into a condo model for home ownership. So I think that there's some things that we can do that way. But I'm excited about the opportunity of what the future in the next 3 years. I think it's important to go back in a few years and see, how have the tweaks that we have made within the last year of the inclusionary housing program, how has that helped us dial up multifamily housing, particularly in amenity-rich neighborhoods, in neighborhoods that people want to live in. So thank you.
Thank you, candidate Steph. Candidate Candace Avalos, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so definitely we need to build more housing affordably. And we need to ensure that the city is investing in permanently affordable housing, especially in chronically underfunded East Portland. I think that this involves things like growing our construction workforce with apprenticeship and job training programs. We need to get more folks into the industry more, and this, it has a universal benefit, right? We're addressing economic issues, giving people living wage jobs, as well as building our city more quickly. And we need to also preserve the affordable homes that we already have, and make sure that there's stronger accountability, that the units are serving people the way that they're intended to. Lastly, I'll just say that the 80% AMI is just still too high for most people in need. So we really need more subsidies and deeper affordability across all of our programs. And we need our state to provide more resources for affordable housing. So it cannot just fall on the shoulders of the city. We need partners across all levels of government to ensure that. So thank you.
Thank you, candidate Candace. Candidate Loretta Smith, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I think as a elected official, city council, when we know something, we need to say something. When I was a county commissioner and I listened to all the reports that came in front of me about, homeless folks, the rising homeless sector were African Americans, and we were getting ready to identify and appropriate money a couple of days later. And so what I did was I called the Urban League and I said, you all need to come down here and testify, because they don't have any providers who serve African Americans. And if you want to do something and you have the ability to appropriate dollars for communities, you have to say something. So this is what separates me from everybody else in the crowd. I've been an elected official. I have the experience. When I know something, I say something. Secondly, last month, the Portland Housing Bureau put out a rapid acquisition request for proposal, giving $15 million, making that available for affordable housing developers to buy existing buildings instead of building new ones. Because to build a new one, it costs anywhere between $400,000 and $700,000 a door. So who did they tell about that $15 million? I don't know if any of our listeners, if they were called, if someone at the city said, this request for proposal, that's public information. Did we let anyone in our community know that this was available? Did we put some policy guidelines that this money has to be used in East Portland or in some of our most vulnerable neighborhoods? I don't think so. That was the first time that I had heard about that particular program. So when we know something, we should say something and we need to act on it.
Thank you, candidate Loretta Smith. The next question is question 3. If elected to city council, you will take office on the same day as a new voter approved police oversight board. State data shows that Portland Police Bureau stops on Black residents have increased by 17%, while stops on white counterparts have decreased by 4%. How will you work with that board to ensure disparities in policing in Portland are monitored, corrected, and prevented? We'll begin with candidate Cale Turn. Cale, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to do is ensure that that commission continue to do its work. In just about every single job, we have a evaluation system that encompasses all the people that are stakeholders, and the city needs to be involved in overseeing the people that is protecting us. The city and its communities need to be able to contribute to the discipline and the corrective actions needed to ensure that there is trust between community members. I would continue to support and advocate for this commission to continue to its work, because it is instrumental and it is vital that our communities have input. It's no secret that the communities of colors are impacted. It's how we deal with it. And if we don't, as a community, have the capability to contribute, then we're just allowing things to happen and we're just saying it's okay for status quo. We need change. And I believe this is how we start the process of change.
Thank you, candidate Cale. Candidate Tamor Ender, you have 2 minutes.
Sure. I love this question, partly because I majored in criminology and I worked on traffic safety projects at the city for a number of years. There's not going to be one answer for this. I think it's multi-pronged. First is, as you know, police stops are one tool of addressing safety, but there are other tools as well. One of those tools is affirmatively building safe streets. It should not be possible for someone to drive 85 miles an hour on 82nd Avenue. And that is something that needs to be addressed through street design. The other things I'll say is there are a number of cities across the world that have unarmed traffic enforcement. And that is something that can and should be explored because we shouldn't tolerate, sometimes things can escalate and we don't have to create those circumstances where they do escalate. Another thing is we can rely on expanding automated enforcement. That is not going to solve everything, but that is another toolkit that can be used. I support a policy that was implemented by the Police Bureau a number of years ago, which de-emphasized minor traffic issues such as a broken tail light, and de-emphasized the role of enforcement for that. What I will say is speeding. So the question for me is, what is the key city interest? And oftentimes the key city interest is speeding, right? That can immediately lead to someone getting in a serious injury crash. That is where we need to prioritize both enforcement resources and also safe street design. And so we're combating this from a number of tools in our toolkit. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Moore. Candidate Loretta Smith, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. That information was very disturbing to hear. I can remember when my son, he's 30. I remember when he got his license and he was driving my car at 16 and he was pulled over. And for many years before he got his license, you know, as a Black mother, I don't know any Black mother who doesn't talk to their son and their daughter, but particularly their Black sons, about how to interact with police. And he said, "Oh, Mom, that's back in your day." No, but it was back in his day, because he got pulled over in my car. And instead of doing what I said, put your hands on the steering wheel, look at the person you're talking to, take the commands, and, don't talk back. And he did everything opposite from what I told him. And that's because you have to really train and educate your kids, just like you have to train and educate the police. There was no reason to stop him. They thought that he had stolen this new car that I gotten. And he didn't. He was only around the corner from his house. So what I'm saying is, we have to build a bridge into community, never let it go, to make sure that police and community are in constant communication. Because I don't think the average person knows this new data that you talked about. We have to make sure that it's not one and done, that our police, just like our sheriffs, that they get training and education, and then they don't go back to it again. You have to constantly have some sort of training and education all the time about these kinds of things, because that's unnecessary.
Thank you, candidate Loretta. Candidate Jamie Dunphy, you have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, as Loretta was saying, this data is shocking but not surprising for anyone who has been paying attention to Portland Police. I actually served on the community oversight body that was the predecessor to the predecessor to the predecessor. I was on the Community Police Relations Committee. It was not an effective body. It was not able to successfully move the Bureau in any meaningful way. And I think part of the reason for that was a lack of leadership from City Council. I think that leadership requires follow through, and leadership requires attention to the details. We need to be very clear what the values are and what the expectations are for the Portland Police Bureau. We need to very clearly support this police oversight board to define what success looks like. And as a city council, we need to be in a position to make sure that we can measure, that we can implement, and we can pivot when necessary. Because a lot of these complicated systems are intended to be successful over the long term. This is not a situation, this is not a board that is intended to fix things by January 2nd of 2024 or 2025. All parts of our community, all communities in Portland, including Black communities, deserve safe streets. They deserve safe parks. They deserve safe communities. Police are an important part of the public safety spectrum. There are scary situations that happen in our community where the only appropriate response is a highly trained, highly accountable professional who is armed and able to approach situations that are scary. But we have used police as a general purpose tool to enforce all government regulation in this community. And that's not unique to Portland, but Portland can fix that by diversifying the tool chest, creating opportunities where we are using things that are not police to go and deal with situations that are not requiring that, and to supporting the goals of what this police oversight board are, whether or not they require.
Thank you, candidate Jamie. Candidate Candace Avalos, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, agree that the information is very distressing. And, you know, we have been talking for so many years. And I was the chair of our Citizen Review Committee, which is one of the pre's to the, the new system. And I helped design the new system in collaboration with community and helped to get that bill passed in 2020. So first I'll say that what we are striving to do by creating a more community-centered oversight board is to really invite community to be part of this discussion of how we can hold our officers accountable. And they need to be at the center of that discussion, and they aren't. And I say that as somebody who has sat on all these different boards and agree it's very frustrating to, you know, put a lot of energy into that and not seeing it get utilized. We wrote a 40-page report after the 2020 protest with best practices and research, information, data about what, you know, we saw and how Portland police could do better. And that 40-page report is sitting in a drawer somewhere collecting dust. I think ultimately what I've learned over my 7 years of working in police accountability is that we have data, we have audits, we have best practices, but none of that matters if our leaders don't create a culture of accountability and if we don't use that data, right? So this new board is an opportunity for us to describe a culture of accountability and agree that the lack of leadership is at the heart of that. And that is the kind of leadership that I plan to bring. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Candace. Candidate David Lynn, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, like many Portlanders, we've been fighting for police accountability for many years. And so many of these data points are not new to anybody. We've seen this going back decades. And, you know, just like many Portlanders, you know, I've seen firsthand the negative outcomes and the lack of response and failures of our previous iterations of any kind of police accountability committee. We really need to honor the will of the voters on this one. It was passed overwhelmingly, and Portlanders are tired of just this same cycle of proposing something and then letting it be sabotaged. And I'm somebody who's running for office who's going to speak honestly and call people out when it needs to be. We have city commissioners like Renee Gonzalez who have been trying to repeatedly undermine this police accountability commission. They're attacking the composition, they're attacking the budget, they're attacking people who are putting their names forward, you know, to sit on this. And we can't just sit by and just use platitudes or, you know, flowery language on an issue of such importance to Portlanders. We really need to call it out, and we need to speak honestly. So we need to make sure that the committee does not get stacked, that we don't let some politicians play politics with this and allow the police to label some people, you know, either pro-police or anti-police. We need professional, well-meaning citizens to sit on that committee and to bring the voice, especially from East Portland, onto that committee and prevent it from being sabotaged. So we need people who are going to stand up to the efforts of, say, the police union and stand up for regular police officers. We need to support the good police by holding the bad ones accountable.
Thank you, candidate David. Candidate Steph Ralph, you have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. I will say on the police oversight board, I just want to be honest when I don't know as much as some of my colleagues, that I am still in a learning space. So what I understand from your question is, well, one, for the police oversight board, that currently there are multiple venues through which someone reports an issue with police, but it is monitored, like then following up on it and understanding where it is in process is really opaque. And so part of the police oversight board, police oversight board's importance is creating one space where that is understood and where it is where issues are stewarded. And I think so we need to, I think that there's general agreement that the police oversight board on one of our first things, we need to demonstrate strong intent to seat that board, to nominate the committee to make sure that it is actually moving forward and we are understanding and valuing the will of the voters that passed this in 2020 and all of the work that has gone into looking to best practices, as Candace mentioned. And I also think in this new, as we're Velcroing apart the executive and legislative function of government, that I think the city council really needs to look at the police oversight board for findings on a regular basis and see how can we correct this and bring it into legislative policy for enduring fixes, because the percentages that you mentioned absolutely cannot endure. We have to have different outcomes in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Steph. Candidate Terrence Hayes, you have 2 minutes.
Y'all, just want to start by the framing of the question just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So we need oversight. We need that oversight commission to sustain, and we need to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure it doesn't disappear or it don't get legislated away. So we all agree there's nothing to talk about. I think what we have to remember is gun violence in the Black community went up 250%. 250%. That is not a number. Those are Black babies and Black bodies. And so this community screamed out for a response to a 250% increase in gun violence of Black young men from Black young men. So when we look at the increase in stops, I read that report. I don't know how many people read it that actually has commented on it, but I sat on an oversight group where some of those officers were involved in those pullovers. So I asked the same questions that folks are talking about now. We should have expected an increase in interaction between Black young men and police because we've seen a 250% increase in gun violence. So if we're going to curb that gun violence, we should have expected some increase in contact. Now, the question has to be for city council is, did they use data? Was it data that drove those stops? And if data didn't drive those stops, we need to hold leadership in PPB accountable to that. But if data drove those increasing stops that could quite possibly have saved the lives of young Black men and women because we had a 250% increase in gun violence, we all need to slow down and make sure that we're being holistic about why those stops might increase. But if they didn't, accountability have to happen. We have to go after leadership. We have to go after practices, and we have to make sure that we're doing data-driven stops and interactions in the Black community. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Terrence Hayes. This will be our final question of the night. Question 4. In the last 4 years, there have been more than 200 traffic fatalities across Portland, impacting both pedestrians and other drivers. Research shows that drivers in Portland are less likely to safely yield for Black pedestrians. Additionally, a Vision Zero report this year finding that Black communities in Portland experience traffic violence at a disproportionate rate. Given these troubling findings, how will you work with local, regional, and state partners to increase safety on road? Candidate Loretta Smith, you have.
Thank you for that question. I think a number of things that you can do to decrease those numbers. What we do know is that in our neighborhoods in East Portland, they're poorly lit. Some of our neighborhoods don't have proper sidewalks. We don't have speed bumps. We don't have these kinds of just basic things that will stop traffic from going so fast. The other thing is we need to fully fund Vision Zero to all of our neighborhoods so that we can educate our community on what's at stake. I looked at the numbers, not just with the Black community. I looked at the entire number, and it is a big one. It's huge. Every weekend, somebody's getting hit. Every weekend, somebody's getting shot. I mean, it just seems like we're becoming more numb to it. So I think as a leader, we need to create policies and put in resources that will educate the community and be willing to spend those infrastructure dollars, because that's what we do really at the city. We're the infrastructure unit of the city. The joint office, they do housing, but we do infrastructure. And so we can create those policies that will identify appropriations for those community-based organizations to come out and talk with communities to see what they need in the individual neighborhoods.
Thank you, candidate Loretta. Candidate Candace Avalos, you have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so, navigating our city, this is a part of daily life. But in East Portland, it is confusing and it's dangerous. So that is whether it's a lack of sidewalks, safe ways to cross streets, unpaved roads, poor lighting. East Portland never got the improvements that we were promised. And this crumbling infrastructure isn't just inconvenient, it's costly and it's potentially deadly, as we are talking about, right? So transportation systems, these are the connective tissue of our society. And in East Portland, those systems are on life support. So we need to rebuild our infrastructure, not just repair it with Band-Aid solutions. Our kids really need safer routes to schools. We need our streets to be prioritized for upgrades and improvements. We need to aggressively invest in infrastructure like we do all other critical issues, because it's also important to remember that transportation investments are just good for everyday people, they're good for small businesses, and they're good for how we grow our community. So ultimately, I think what I'm saying is we need to lean into Vision Zero status with the more lighting, better crosswalks, ramps, barriers to protect bikers, marked bus lanes. We also know that the rate of injury and death increases drastically as driving speeds decrease, right? So we need to redesign our streets to reduce the speed in which people are driving. People are zooming through East Portland all the time, and we need to create infrastructure around slowing down our streets. But ultimately, East Portland deserves safe streets. Everybody deserves to get to where they're heading in a safe way. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Candace. Candidate Steph Routh, you have 2 minutes.
Oh, I was hoping you were going to go with me next. I think what Loretta Smith and Candace Avalos just said go straight to my heart. When I became the executive director of Oregon Walks, I traded my winter holiday traditions with families to coordinating vigils for people who died while walking on our streets. So this, I feel very deeply what are issues related to traffic safety. And as both Candace and Loretta have mentioned, our investments, and as I shared at the top, our investments in East Portland have made it a convenient place to drive through. They have not made it a nourishing place to live in, and they have certainly not made it a nourishing place to walk in. Over 60% of our high crash corridors are in East Portland, and that is primarily, it has been by design situated in communities of color. And the recent pedestrian master plan that was updated in 2019 had a special focus group on walking while Black, because there was a recognition that that Black and Brown communities are targeted for traffic violence. And street lighting is absolutely one of those pieces, and not just street lighting, but pedestrian scale street lighting, as well as crosswalks that are visible and make sense and reduce those interactions. And there's also the signals of just the width of high crash corridors. And I think but the good news is, I think one of those pieces of developing walkable neighborhoods, which we can do around Place, they slow the traffic down. They also engage with economic prosperity, disability justice, aging in place and community. My time is up. I could go on for a very long time. Thank you for this question.
Thank you, candidate Steph. Candidate David Lynn, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this really reflects the underinvestment in East Portland and how it has always been a lot of pass-through communities where people are expected to get through fast on their way to downtown instead of it being a safe and welcoming place for our communities, especially as we're talking about putting in so much more housing density and making these walkable communities. We need to have streets that are commensurate with that. I grew up on 82nd. I've seen how dangerous the intersections can be at 82nd and Division or 122nd and Stark. And we've seen some investment in that, but people really want to see more accountability. People want to see people being held accountable for running red lights, for reckless driving. Everybody who slows down to stop at the light can see the 2 or 3 people racing through at the end. And that kind of stuff is what creates the unsafe conditions in our community. And there's certainly a part of our community that's tired of being kind of like just thinking that if you put islands in the middle of the street, that will somehow reduce automatically traffic fatalities. We want to be definitely very data driven and targeted where we're making those investments, where we're slowing people down, and look at it holistically. Look at things like over-serving of our at our bars. Look for other reasons why people are, being killed on our streets. And then we really need to invest in public transit. We have amazing public transit in the inner city, but out here it's abysmal. Many times, many bus lines end at 8 o'clock. And so there is no alternative except for people to walk in the dark, in the rain, on the streets, and on places like Powell where there's no sidewalks. So we really need that investment. We need to hold people accountable. And then we can really not have this false dichotomy. We can fix potholes and we can build safe and protected bike lanes at the same time.
Thank you, candidate David. Candidate Terrence Hayes, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I want to start by saying I feel like Steph, transportation is not the strongest thing I bring. So I look at what Candace talked about and what everybody else talked about in the descriptions, and I say it's a lot of folks on here that understand that at a level that I don't. What I do understand is your question talked about the fact that Black people are more likely to be targeted, is what I'll call it, or folks are not going to slow down when they see Black folks at risk of traffic being harmed. That's a hard issue, right? When President Biden got in, we understand the hate that was happening towards the Asian community, and he created specific legislation for Asian hate. And the fact of the matter is, if the data shows that people are less likely to slow down for Black folks, we need to create legislation that holds them accountable. There is no amount of lighting, roads, bikes that's going to stop people from not seeing Black lives in the same way that they see their white or Hispanic or Asian counterparts. The problem is the heart. When people do not value Black lives, they do not feel like they should slow down, they should stop, or anything like that. That is a problem. That's a hard problem. And I agree with David. We need to have a certain level of accountability when we can see that you behaved in a manner that put specifically Black lives at risk. Legislators need to step up. And at the end of the day, there's nothing I can do on the city council level that's going to protect Black lives from people that do not value them on the road. If you're unwilling to slow down because you don't value Black lives, you're not going to do it because I told you to. We have to do more at every level to protect Black folks in this city.
Thank you, candidate Terrence. Candidate Kale Turn, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm glad everybody brought up the lighting issues and the sidewalk issues. I think those are a huge part of it to make East Portland safer. Transportation is a huge issue here for us. I mean, in some places, people have to wait on the trail to get on the bus, and furthermore, it's slow. It takes, a long time to get from point A to point B, and, people are just having to, are just having to take a long time to get to places. We've had our fair share of affordable housing here in East Portland. With increased traffic, people are rushing a little bit more to get from point A to point B. That creates a situation where folks are unsafe, and our street infrastructure doesn't help. Especially when crosswalks. If you haven't walked before, in some streets, by the time you reach the other side, it's telling you to, the red light comes on and tells you to stop walking. So, there are some things that we can do, like extending wait time on streetlights, simple things that can slow people down. The sidewalk investments, I think, also helps to slow traffic down. All in all, I think accountability is also an issue. Thinking of that incident where that particular individual was released from an incident that ended up assaulting that Asian individual at the park. Things like that can't happen. If people are caught doing something, they need to be held accountable, and we need to make sure that they're not right back on the streets, placing other folks at risk. So we need to continue to enforce the laws that we have in place and make sure that people are being real careful and real cautious, so that it doesn't impact anyone.
Thank you, candidate Kale. Just a reminder to make sure that you mute yourself when you are not speaking. Candidate Tamora Ender, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you for this question. As a parent that lives near 122nd and Stark, this is constantly on my mind. That intersection is statistically the most dangerous in the entire city. I had the privilege of serving on the board of Oregon Walks, where we took a comprehensive look at every single pedestrian that was killed within the city of Portland between 2017 and 19. And so I am very aware of the statistics, and have been engaged in a number of advocacy efforts around this issue. From a mechanics perspective, a lot of people mentioned that, so I'm not going to go into more detail other than to say things like pedestrian head starts that allow pedestrians across the street before the light turns green are a key thing. Left turn calming, which slows how drivers turn around a street, have had significant success in terms of reducing fatalities at those specific locations. Again, like David said, supporting public transit is key, and making sure people feel safe on transit through, security and things like that. That makes a big difference. And also in terms of cameras, automated enforcement, East Portland District 1 has about 2/3 of the city's automated enforcement cameras. I am someone that's going to be pushing for geographic equity so that we are not disproportionately collecting fines and fees from low-income communities of color in Council District 1. That's going to be a priority for me. But the truth is that 57% of fatalities occur on just 8% of streets. And so those streets warrant a disproportionate amount of our investment. And then I'll just go back to my overarching view. Again, some of the intersections where we see traffic crashes are the same intersections that we see gun violence at. And ultimately, my lens is going to be how we reduce life expectancy. If we can get a handle on some of these gun violence issues, if we can get a handle on some of these traffic fatalities, what we will see is less disparity between East and West of 82nd Avenue, and ultimately we'll be able to extend East Portland's health outcomes and life expectancy.
Thank you, candidate Tamora. Candidate Jamie Dunphy, you have 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you. My colleagues have done a really good job of outlining this. I won't belabor the point, but as we've said, East Portland is home to the majority of the people of color. It's home to 41% of all the children in the city of Portland. It's also home to the majority of the lacking of sidewalks, unpaved roads, streetlights, and crosswalks. So I think it is worth noting I-84 West has no exits for the entire length of District 1. That is because that is a piece of infrastructure that was designed to get people through our community, not to our community. That means that our major arterials like 122nd, Burnside, and Powell, and Division, and Gleason have become de facto highways. And the behavior of a lot of that has become that. There are things that have happened in our community to try and affect community safety that have actually made things worse. The protected bike lanes that were designed for the Gateway neighborhood have increased the number of pedestrian accidents, and also at the same time decreased the amount of business to those businesses along the street. In some situations, in some communities where speed bumps and traffic slowing has been done, the community has pushed back really hard, and some of that infrastructure development has not worked in ways that the community really specifically mentioned that it was not going to work. And a lot of these speed bumps and traffic slowing is actually driving unsafe behavior onto residential streets away from main arterials. We need things that are done with us and for us, not just to us from an office on downtown. Some of the major ways that have not been mentioned specifically that I will say that the city council needs to focus on is bringing more jobs to East Portland so that fewer people are in their cars in the first place. The more we can address street homelessness and unhoused individuals, the fewer people will be out in situations where they can often get hit. Homeless people end up being a disproportionate.
Thank you, candidate Jamie. We will now conclude with closing statements from the candidates in reverse alphabetical order, beginning with candidate Cale Turn. Cale, you have 1 minute.
Okay, hello. So our new model of government in Portland will give more representation and to a more diverse population in Portland. You'll get to elect the three that you wish to represent you, whether it's a person that has experience as a city administrator, a community advocate, a social worker, business owner, health workers. You get a variety of choice. If elected, I will bring to the city council my personal professional experiences to address housing shortage by exploring issues that causes people to lose their homes. I'll be working to build sidewalks and our street infrastructures through holding bureaus accountable for the work that they do and increase investments. With your help, I will also work to make sure that our city's first responders have the manpower and means to protect our city with, so everybody can feel safe. It's not, and let's not act like we have an unlimited amount of money. The only way we will able to do this is to increase revenues. We need to support our local businesses.
Thank you, candidate Cale. Candidate Loretta Smith, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you for having this forum this evening so that we can talk to the folks who support the Urban League and that you fight for every day. My eight years of experience as a Multnomah County Commissioner, it has taught me how to work with my colleagues on a variety of different issues, and I've built great coalitions and meaningful policies. I have created over 110 actual policies that have my name on it. I've created more than anyone else that sat beside me. I know what it means to do constituent services, and that's why I'm excited about doing this right now. I see my videos now, but one thing is for sure, you will have a relentless champion in Loretta Smith by electing her to Portland City Council. I have experience and I have a track record and background and leadership, and you will always have an open door with a Loretta Smith City Council.
Thank you, candidate Loretta. Candidate Steph Ralph, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Libra Ford, for moderating. Thanks to Urban League and thanks to all of our co-hosts. I think you've heard we have an embarrassment of riches in District 1. We have just some phenomenal candidates. And I think, the unique value proposition that I bring is I have a pretty steep housing policy and transportation policy and about 20 years of community organizing, coalition building. I'm adjunct faculty at Portland State University, where I teach community organizing and social change in the urban studies and planning department. And I'm just very grateful for this opportunity to share. And in 4 questions, you've just really covered a lot of ground. So thank you very much. I just have gratitude. Thank you. And I will now mute.
Thank you, candidate Steph. Candidate David Lynn, you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure, like many of my colleagues at this point in the race, I'm pretty tired of talking about myself. But yeah, so I hope my record, speaks for itself. 15 years in government, 8 years in college, studying to be good at just this job. But really what I'm most proud of is 20 years volunteering and fighting in the community in East Portland and fighting, not pretending like I have all the answers, but that the community does. And that we can really empower our community to have their own vision and to help facilitate that. And as a school board member, I've learned how that you have to work well with your other elected officials, and that we can really lean on each other and we can really make a team out in here in East Portland that really does represent the community and brings its voice to City Hall. And so that's what I'm really passionate about. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate David. Candidate Terrence Hayes, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I hope my mic working. But what I've got out of this is that it's real easy to build advocacy organizations on the back of Black folks. It's very difficult to have real answers and solutions for that same community. We need leadership that can recognize that our most underrepresented community, when it does well, all of our city does well. When Black folks thrive, Portland thrive. When we struggle and suffer, Portland struggle and suffer. I hope that as a representative in city council, that I can bring real solutions to rising gun violence, real solutions to the lack of home ownership in the Black community, and real solutions to our clean streets issues in this city. I just want to say that I love Portland. This city has been amazing to me and my family, and I definitely want to be a part of getting it back to that city that cares for all people. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Terrence. Candidate Tamor Ender, you have 1 minute.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll just say, it's important that people in East Portland can see themselves reflected in the leadership of their city council. I'm proud to be from a working family, and I'm proud in a council district of over 100 languages represented to be the first Middle Eastern candidate for city council. Over the course of my 6 years in local government, I've managed scope, schedule, budget, and risk for city projects and helped launch different programs like bike share and fixed speed safety cameras. And every time I've done this, I've always centered community, whether it's through focus groups or making sure the outcomes that we had met the goals of East Portland. In this new form of government where whoever is elected will be one vote out of 12, the people who will be most successful are those who are kind, collaborative, and focused on outcomes. And that's what I intend to do. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Tamor. Candidate Jamie Dunphy, you have 1.
Perfect. Thank you. So I am Jamie Dunphy. Thank you all so much for having us tonight. This is a phenomenal forum, and thanks to all my colleagues who are also vying for the city council. I have been in public service in this community for 20 years. I truly love Portland. I went to high school in the city, and I have not had a chance to leave and go somewhere else because I love this place. But and being in public service for over 20 years does not naturally make me optimistic, but I am cautiously optimistic about the next chapter of what Portland can bring. I'm excited that we have the opportunity to meaningfully change how this system works and deliver real results for our community, but only if we hit the ground running. We cannot afford to have the city council, 12 new city council members learning on the job. I'm ready to lead on day one in this community and to help my fellow city council members who will be elected, who will be some raw talent, absolutely, and making sure that we can meaningfully deliver on the promise of what this new system is, because the promise of East Portland is unparalleled in our next chapter, and I'm excited to help lead that next part. Thanks, Jamie Dunphy. Have a good night.
Thank you, candidate Jamie. All right, thank you, candidate Jamie. Candidate Candace Avalos.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you again, Candace Avalos. I really enjoyed this opportunity, and I really enjoyed the questions. I thought they were very thoughtful and really particular for East Portland. East Portland has an opportunity to rewrite our story and our narrative. I think that we get painted with such a broad brush because nobody actually bothers to understand and get to know East Portlanders. When I'm knocking on doors, I'm seeing myself and my family story on that doorstep. We are home to almost 100 languages. Many of our small businesses are owned by immigrant and refugee community members. We are a community full of nurses and teachers and union trade workers and social workers and everything in between. And I will never promise to have all of the answers, but I will promise to value your voices and your trust. As a bilingual first-generation Black Tina, I would be proud to help amplify this community's voice in City Hall. So check out my website, and I hope to earn your support. CandaceForPortland.com. Thank you.
Thank you all. As tonight's candidates forum ends, I want to thank our partners at LNS Captioning and Open Signal who are airing this forum. We thank tonight's candidates who are running for City Council of District 1 for participating tonight, and our community partners. I also want to highlight the importance of voting. The deadline to register to vote for the election is October 15th. And election day is November 5th. Democracy only works when people vote. So get registered if you aren't and vote. At the Urban League of Portland, much of our work is done with local partners who have our deep commitment to our shared values. We would like to thank the following partners: Reimagine Oregon, NCAA of Portland, Fair Housing Council, SEIU 49, Welcome Home Coalition of Black Men, Kairos, Muslim Education Trust, Women's Foundation of Oregon, YWCA, Impact Northwest, Children's Institute, NEA, Latina Network, Northwest Pilot Project, and Self-Enhancement Incorporated. In closing, please remember that the Urban League is a nonprofit that relies on donations and membership to serve the community. It is through your generosity that the Urban League of Portland can host forums and other events like this. Again, tonight's event was part of Urban League's series of virtual candidate forums for the general election. Please visit ulpdx.org to learn more about our series of events. If you need assistance voting or registering during the election season, staff at the Urban League are ready to talk to you. Reach out via their website, social media, or call 503-281-2600 for assistance. On behalf of the Urban League President, Nikenge Harmon Johnson, the Board of Directors, and all our members, I thank you, our audience, for joining us tonight. I am Libra Ford, the Executive Director for Women's Foundation of Oregon. Good night and stay safe.
Thank you.
Should we leave? Yes? No? Yeah.
Sorry, it's
We're
like
all
you-
good over here at Open Signal. Thank you all
Okay,
so
good.
much.
We cleared. Sorry, I was looking at Open Signal to be like, give us the clearance. Again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It was a great conversation. I think folks learned a ton, and we just really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Those were amazing questions.
Thank you.
We work hard. We work hard.